Welcome back to Morning Trade Live. I'm Diane King Hall. Time now to go inside out on two of the biggest earnings that we've been watching. We had Netflix out and Taiwan Semiconductor. Joining me here at the desk, here at the New York Stock Exchange, we've got James Dimmert, founder and chief investment officer at Main Street Research. We're going to start with a dive into Netflix. They posted their numbers yesterday. It's not being received well today. They beat 528 for EPS. Revenue was 9.37 billion, right? What's going on here? What's the reaction to?
Yeah, Diane, nice to see you. I think that it's sort of a story of what have you done for me lately? There's so much expectation after last quarter. They just blew the numbers out. So I think, investors here are probably being a little over negative is what I would say. I mean, the stock's down, 6%. The numbers were great. They beat top, bottom. I think a lot of investors don't like the idea that they're not going to release the subscriber numbers anymore. I think investors should really think twice about that. Apple did that in 2018. They stopped giving some subscription numbers. The stock did the same thing. It lulled around actually for a quarter or so. But then later on, it really picked up because, the company's really getting more mature. They're looking at now, how do we expand profit margins? Let's forget, subscriber numbers being so important.
And it's so wild to think of it now as like it is a more mature company. And I was thinking about that, in fact, today and wondering if that was where some of the rub is now. It's like, how much further can it grow? And when you think about, when it first hit the scene and this strange new kind of competitor to Blockbuster. I'm dating myself, right? But in terms of subs and the most recent numbers, did it meet what really the street was looking for? Was this kind of number in behind the scenes that was like, okay, this is what the number we were really looking for when it comes to subs?
I think they met the street. And they beat the street. The problem is they're trading at 35 times earnings. So, whenever that's the case, which is, 50% more than the market multiple or more, there's a lot of expectation. And I think investors really were looking for that momentum they had in the last quarter. That's very hard to duplicate. So I think, again, it's what have you done for me lately? The numbers are fantastic. What's really cool about the story with Netflix is they're moving towards live sports events. And, we think that could be a great driver and a creative driver on top of already this momentum of subscribers. I mean, they are the king of streaming.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, because, they're really the king, and it's not like it's kind of a distant second when you think about the other players behind Netflix. Where does the growth come from for Netflix next? Is it this group of people who are still not, who are still sharing accounts and haven't converted, or is it overseas growth?
Well, it's both, and they've really done a job that I thought was impossible to crack this code sharing thing, right? I think my son was upset about that, but that was very accretive to earnings, and it continues to be the case. They're still working on. There's still lots of that going on, and then additional subscriptions, and again, this new live event type of thing, sports specifically, could be a great growth driver. There's lots of parts of the world that are still not Netflix users.
So speaking of the growth trajectory for Netflix and the focus on live sports, can it really, capture some of that market, especially when you think about the players who are already in that market, and others who are trying to grow in that space as well, like Amazon, for instance?
Wow, it's so competitive for the eyeballs, right? And I think we all face that when we look on our screen, which one do we choose? But Netflix has a great brand. They're certainly the king of streaming, as we talked about. And so I think if anybody's going to, in this horse race, going to sort of eventually take the lead, I think it's going to be Netflix.
All right. Stay with us. We're going to come back to you for a look at Taiwan Semi. I want to go to our senior markets correspondent, Kevin Green, to take a look at an example trade for Netflix. Kevin, take us through one.
Yeah, definitely. Well, James kind of talked about the downward pressure that we are seeing in the stock. And from a technical standpoint, there is an area of support at $530, which could be a magnet for the near term. So I'm looking at an example trade of doing a bear put spread, buying the 560 puts and then selling the 540 puts, doing this for a debit of $8. So the max loss would be $800. Max gain would be $1,200. And the break even point would be $552. Once again, this would be profitable if the stock is below 540. $140 at the time of expiration. This is going to be the May 17th expiration, and just kind of trying to capitalize on maybe some of this downward momentum. Also, that resetting of that multiple that James was talking about as well may also be a little bit of a catalyst for a downside move. So that's really the structure of this trade. Just for a short term, I think James is right when it comes to the long-term prospects of the company. Definitely have some green shoots there. But right now we are seeing maybe the market trying to re-rate the stock based on some of the metrics that they did report last night.
Okay, so market trying to re-rate the stock there. All right, let's pivot to Taiwan Semi. That company in focus as well after releasing its quarterly numbers. The stock right now off more than 2%, so certainly not being dinged as much as Netflix, and Netflix may possibly getting some repricing given where it's been. Now, heading into this, you said that Taiwan Semi would likely be a main event this week. Does that hold up in terms of the numbers that you saw?
I think it is the main event. You know, this is a company that's very critical to the AI tech-led bull market, is what we call it. And, you know, I think this is a story of the best is yet to come. You know, they beat top and bottom. The stock's only 20 times earnings, but I think here investors are picking the raisins out of the cake, Diane. You know, they're sort of saying, well, you know, the automotive part was, you know, that they were weak in the automotive. They were strong in AI, which is really what we want to see. Yeah. And then they were really weak in handsets, and that's the Apple, right? You know, Apple's sales in China are affecting TSM. You know, I think, again, investors picking the raisins out of the cake, stock's a bit weak on really strong numbers. Those two segments, auto, I don't know if that gets better, but boy, we think Apple in the next 2 quarters brings an AI subscription-based service, which TSM is going to feed right into. So we think that iPhone problem, that handset problem, is going to be a positive thing in the next couple of quarters.
I love this analogy because, yes, who wants raisins in their cake unless I guess it's like a fruit cake or something like that, yes. Right? But let me ask you, in terms of the kind of quarter ahead for TSM, can it recover? Can it regain some market share in the quarter ahead?
I think it can. And one of the things that I really liked about the numbers is the AI numbers were strong with a tremendous amount of momentum. I mean, they're thinking even by the end of the year, twice the orders that they have now. So that's the part of the guidance I think investors need to focus on. That's the most profitable and probably most lucrative part of their business. And then a hitch to that in the next couple quarters is that Apple rotation to AI, probably using Siri, which will be exciting for us Apple users. It might even cause us to have to get a new phone. You know, it might need a new generation of an iPhone, which again, TSM is going to work perfectly with that. They're going to have a tremendous market as Apple comes up with these new ideas. What
percentage of the market do you think TSM stands to be able to grab?
I think the bulk of it. I mean, specific to where they are in auto and handsets. Now, on AI, they're going to be competing with the godfather of NVIDIA, right? But that race, but their race is pretty neck and neck, and they're a big competitor. I think if in this sort of correction we're going through in the overall market in tech, investors should really look at TSM as a great opportunity with the stock down.
All right, TSM in focus. Let's go to Kevin Green. We want to bring him back in. Thank you so much, James Dimmert, founder and chief investment officer at Main Street Research. Kevin, let's look at an example trade for TSM. What do you got?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, James is right. TSM actually touches around 50% or even more of all semiconductors in the world. So they do have a significant amount of market share right now. And when you're looking at some of these other companies like an Apple or even an Intel, they do believe that they are seeing a bottoming when it comes to chips for laptops as well as handsets here. So this is actually a very unique trade for somebody that would like to create a longer term portfolio position in Taiwan Semi, but also having some upside exposure in the near term, looking at buying the May 24th 130 calls, selling the May 24th 135 calls, and then also selling the 120 puts, same expiration. That put is in order to be able to reduce the cost of the debit. The overall debit is 60 cents. So the max loss here would actually be $12,060. That's if the stock goes to zero. If the stock goes below $120, you would be put the stock, and that's where you could actually have a long position in this name for the long term here. But you could also have a max gain of $440. That's if the stock goes above $135 by the time of expiration. And the break even is $130.60. So the debit that you spend, and then add that to the long strike on that call side here. Once again, looking for a bullish move in this stock. Also, the expiration does coincide with NVIDIA's earnings, which is going to be on May 22nd, and they could actually get a little bit of a boost in price if NVIDIA does shock the street once again.
All right, teeing up NVIDIA's earnings. Kevin Green, Senior Markets Correspondent. Thank you, Kevin.